The sound of koi koi. I still remember the first time I heard that sound, the clicking of high heels against the cold, hard floors in the dead of night. They said it was Miss Koi Koi, and I thought it was just another silly school legend. But I was wrong. So wrong. By the time I realized the truth, it was almost too late. I had to escape. I had to survive. But the terror that haunted me then still follows me now, even across oceans. This is my story. My name is Emily Summers, and this is the story of how I nearly lost my life in a small Nigerian village. It's a story of curiosity, of fear, and of survival. I never thought that my passion for cultural heritage would lead me to the brink of death. But it did, and the experience has left a scar on my soul that will never heal. I grew up in a small town in Indiana. My love for cultural heritage and history took root when I was young. Every summer, my parents would take me to historical sites, museums, and cultural festivals, fueling my curiosity about different cultures around the world. But it was during my sophomore year of college that I discovered my true passion, African history. Specifically, the rich and vibrant cultures of Nigeria. I immersed myself in the stories, the art, the music. I spent hours in the library, poring over books about the Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa peoples. The more I learned, the more fascinated I became. When the opportunity arose to study abroad in Nigeria, I jumped at it. My friends and family were puzzled by my choice. Why Nigeria? They asked. They couldn't understand my obsession with a place so far removed from everything I knew. But I was determined. I wanted to experience the culture firsthand, to live it, not just study it from afar. The program I chose was a semester-long exchange at an all-girls public school located in a remote village in Nigeria. It was a far cry from the bustling cities of Lagos or Abuja that I had read about. The village was small, with a close-knit community that seemed untouched by time. The school was old, with a kind of charm that only age can bring. The classrooms were simple, the walls adorned with posters of African leaders, and the dormitories were sparse but clean. I was the only foreigner in the entire school, and while the girls were friendly, there was always a sense of distance between us. I attributed it to the cultural differences and the fact that I was an outsider. The village itself was beautiful in a rugged, unpolished way. The streets were narrow and dusty, lined with small shops and homes made of mud bricks. The people were warm and welcoming, but there was an underlying tension that I couldn't quite place. It was as if the village was holding its breath, waiting for something. But I pushed those thoughts aside. I was here to learn, to immerse myself in the culture, not to dwell on my anxieties. From the very first night, I knew something was different about the school. It wasn't just the unfamiliar sounds of the night or the strange, spicy smells that wafted through the air. It was something else. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. But I brushed it off as nerves. After all, I was in a completely new environment, thousands of miles away from home. It was natural to feel a little unsettled. But it wasn't until a few weeks later that I encountered the legend of Miss Koi Koi. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was sitting in the courtyard with some of the girls, trying to practice my Hausa, when I overheard a group of seniors talking in hushed tones. They were speaking in a mix of English and Pidgin, but I caught the name Miss Koi Koi. Curious, I asked one of the girls, Amina, who was sitting next to me, about it. She looked at me with wide eyes and shook her head. "You don't want to know," she said quietly. But I did want to know. So I pressed her, and after a few minutes of convincing, she finally relented. "Miss Koi Koi was a teacher here, a long time ago," Amina began, her voice barely above a whisper. She was very beautiful, with long, straight hair and always wore red high heels. She was strict, too strict, some would say. She would punish girls for the smallest mistakes, and she would do it in ways that were cruel. The girls hated her, but they feared her more. Amina paused, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening before continuing. One day, something happened. No one knows exactly what, but there was a fight, and Miss Koi, she died. They say she fell down the stairs and broke her neck, but some say the girls pushed her. Her death was ruled an accident, but ever since then, strange things have been happening in this school. At night, you can hear the sound of her high heels clicking down the halls. They say if you hear it, she's coming for you. I laughed it off at first. It sounded like a typical ghost story, the kind meant to scare new students. But Amina's face was serious, and the other girls nodded in agreement. Don't laugh, one of the seniors, Chioma, warned. It's not a joke. Many girls have seen her. And those who do, they never forget. I couldn't get the story out of my mind, but I didn't believe in ghosts. I was here to learn, to immerse myself in the culture, not to be scared off by some silly legend. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that settled in my stomach. The first time I heard it was a week later. It was a little past midnight, and I was studying for an upcoming exam. The dormitory was quiet, the other girls fast asleep. Suddenly, I heard it, the distinct sound of heels clicking against the floor. Click, click, click. My heart skipped a beat, but I told myself it was just one of the girls. Maybe someone had a pair of heels and was sneaking around after hours. But the sound grew louder, closer, until it was right outside my door. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A shadow passed by, and for a brief moment, I saw a flash of red, a high heel. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The footsteps continued down the hall and faded into the distance. The next morning, I was shaken but still skeptical. I mentioned it to Amina, who looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. You heard her, she whispered. Miss Koi. She's real. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that I was letting the stories get to me. But deep down, I knew what I had seen. And it wasn't my imagination. Over the next few weeks, the sightings became more frequent. It was always the same. Late at night, when the school was quiet, I would hear the sound of heels clicking down the halls. Sometimes, I would catch a glimpse of a shadow or a flash of red out of the corner of my eye. Other times, I would hear whispers, soft and low, like someone was standing right behind me. But every time I turned around, there was no one there. The other girls noticed it too. They became more withdrawn, more fearful. No one wanted to talk about it, but the fear was palpable. It was like a dark cloud had settled over the school, suffocating us all. And the worst part was, there was nothing we could do about it. One night, things took a turn for the worse. I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, when I heard the familiar clicking sound. But this time, it was different. It was faster, more frantic, like someone was running. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound grew louder, closer, until it was right outside my door. And then, without warning, the door slammed shut with a force that shook the entire room. I screamed and jumped out of bed, running to the door. But when I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. It was like something, or someone, was holding it shut from the other side. I pounded on the door, yelling for help, but no one came. The footsteps continued, pacing back and forth outside my room, growing more and more frantic. Then, suddenly, they stopped. The silence was deafening. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear anything. But there was nothing. Just silence. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in fear. It felt like hours. But eventually, the door creaked open, and I stumbled back, expecting to see something, anything, on the other side. But there was nothing. The hallway was empty. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I couldn't. The fear was too real, too suffocating. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't just a legend. Miss Koi Koi was real. And she was angry. The next day, I went to the headmistress and told her everything. I expected her to dismiss me, to tell me it was all in my head. But instead, she looked at me with a grave expression and said, "You should leave." I was stunned. "What do you mean?" "Miss Koi Koi is not just a legend," she said quietly. "She is a spirit that haunts this school. She is vengeful, and once she sets her sights on someone, she will not stop until she gets what she wants." I stared at her in disbelief. "But why? Why is she doing this?" The headmistress sighed. "No one knows for sure. Some say it's because of how she died, that she was pushed down the stairs by the girls she tormented. Others say it's because she was never given a proper burial, that her spirit is restless. But whatever the reason, she is dangerous. And the longer you stay here, the more at risk you are." I didn't know what to do. I had come to Nigeria to learn, to experience the culture, and now I was being told to leave because of a ghost. It seemed absurd. But the fear in the headmistress's eyes was real, and I couldn't ignore it. That night, I packed my bags. I didn't tell anyone. I just wanted to leave quietly, without drawing attention to myself. But as I was packing, I heard it again, the clicking of heels. This time, it was louder, more insistent, like she knew I was trying to leave. I grabbed my bag and ran out of the dormitory, not caring who saw me. The halls were dark and empty, but the sound of heels followed me, growing louder and louder with each step. I reached the front gate, only to find it locked. Panic set in as I fumbled with the lock, my hands trembling. But it wouldn't budge. The clicking grew louder, closer, until it was right behind me. I turned around, and for the first time, I saw her. She was tall, with long, dark hair that fell over her face. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and she was wearing a red dress and matching high heels. But it was her eyes that terrified me the most, cold, empty, like she wasn't really there. She reached out to me, her hand cold as ice, and I felt a sharp pain in my chest, like something was squeezing my heart. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was trapped. But then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The pain, the fear, everything just stopped. I was lying on the ground, gasping for air, and she was gone. The gate was open, and the night was still and silent, as if nothing had happened. I didn't look back. I ran, as fast and as far as I could. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town, where I collapsed in exhaustion. The next morning, I booked a flight back to the United States. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I just wanted to forget. But I can't forget. The sound of those heels haunts me still. Every night, when the world is quiet and still, I hear it, the clicking of heels, echoing in the darkness. And I know, deep down, that she is still there, waiting. Waiting for me to return. But I never will. I thought I was safe once I returned to the US, but the nightmare didn't end there. In the weeks that followed, I tried to settle back into my normal life, but I was plagued by nightmares and a growing sense of unease. I would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, the sound of those heels echoing in my ears. During the day, I couldn't concentrate. My thoughts kept drifting back to that night, to the look in her eyes, to the feeling of her cold hand on my chest. My friends noticed the change in me. They said I was quieter, more withdrawn. I tried to explain what had happened, but every time I opened my mouth, the words would get stuck in my throat. How could I explain that I was being haunted by a ghost? It sounded ridiculous, even to me. But the fear was real, and it was growing stronger every day. One evening, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. It was late, and the streets were empty, but the cool night air felt refreshing against my skin. I walked aimlessly, trying to calm my racing thoughts. But then I heard it, the unmistakable clicking of heels against the pavement. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned around, half expecting to see her standing there, but there was nothing. The street was empty. But the sound continued, growing louder, closer. I started walking faster, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. But no matter how fast I walked, the sound followed me, relentless and unyielding. By the time I reached my apartment, I was in a full-blown panic. I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it tight. But the sound didn't stop. It was inside, echoing through the walls, through my mind, until I thought I was going to lose my sanity. I called my parents the next morning and told them everything. To their credit, they didn't dismiss me. They listened patiently, but I could hear the concern in their voices. They suggested I see a therapist, and I agreed. I needed help. I couldn't live like this anymore. The therapist, Dr. Turner, was a kind woman in her late 40s. She had a calm, soothing presence that put me at ease. I told her everything about the legend of Miss Koi Koi, about what I had seen, about the sounds that haunted me even now. She listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Emily, what you're experiencing is very real to you, but I want to assure you that what you went through in Nigeria has triggered a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. Your mind is trying to process what happened, and it's manifesting these symptoms." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was all in my head, that I could be cured with time and therapy. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. This wasn't just PTSD. This was something else. Something far more sinister. Dr. Turner prescribed me some medication to help with the anxiety and nightmares. For a while, it seemed to work. The nightmares became less frequent, and I was able to sleep through the night. The sound of heels faded into the background, becoming little more than a distant memory. But then, one night, it all came rushing back. I knew then that I couldn't stay here. I couldn't stay in this apartment, in this city, in this country. I had to get away, as far away as possible. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. No matter where I went, she would follow me. She was a part of me now, a shadow that I could never escape. In the weeks that followed, I made arrangements to leave the country. I quit my job, sold my belongings, and booked a one-way ticket to a small island in the Caribbean. It was isolated, far from the hustle and bustle of city life, and I hoped that the distance would give me some peace. But even now, as I sit on this beach, watching the waves crash against the shore, I can't shake the feeling that she's still with me. That she's watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. I don't know how much longer I can keep running. I don't know if I'll ever be free of her. But I do know one thing, no matter how far I go, no matter how many miles I put between us, I will never forget the sound of those heels clicking in the darkness. The sound of Miss Koi Koi, the ghost that haunts me still.